There you go.
In 2012, Amherst College student Trey Malone spoke out against his university and drew the attention of the nation. His unorthodox medium was his published suicide note. According to the note, published on goodmenproject.com, Trey was a victim of sexual assault. He criticized Amherst for their improper handling of his case, describing it as emotionless hand-washing. Amherst's failure to provide proper support, their failure to properly report to the district attorney, and ultimately, their failure to legitimize Trey's sexual assault led to his suicide at the end of that academic year. The most heartbreaking part of this story is that it is not unique. In her work, A Theory of Violence, gender theorist Aisha Pandey writes about the power of violence as rhetoric on a culture, focusing predominantly on sexual assault. Criticisms of her work ask the question as to why she only focuses on males being violent perpetrators and women being vulnerable victims. And her response was that focusing on anything else would distract from what she calls the real problem. Pandey's writings are not the only pieces of rhetoric that perpetuate her theory. You can find more anywhere you look. Today, I will attempt to persuade you that all sexual assault victim rhetoric should be gender neutral by first, describing the background currently with the sexual assault rhetoric. Second, discussing the problems that are created by this. And finally, presenting some solutions. So with that, let's explore the background. Sexual assault rhetoric is usually heavily gendered. For example, when we think of support for sexual assault victims, we usually see something like this. Rhetoric with an emphasis on female victims, highlighting her and mentioning woman on both of these posters. But when we see prevention, we see something like this. Rhetoric focused on male perpetrators, telling men not to rape and telling us to educate our young boys. Or something like this. Rhetoric that paints males as hyper-aggressors towards vulnerable women. However, sexual assault is not 100% female victim, male perpetrator, as Aisha Pandey and these posters might suggest. The 2014 National Crime Victimization Survey released by the Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that 38% of all sexual assaults in 2014 were committed against males. 46% of those assaults were committed by female perpetrators. A little closer to home, the Campus Sexual Assault Survey, retrieved from the National Criminal Justice Reference Center, reports that 1 in 5 college-age women and 1 in 16 college-age males will be the victim of a sexual assault before they graduate. What this means is that approximately 1 out of every 8 victims of sexual assault are male. So everyone agrees that sexual assault is a problem, and naturally, significant action is taken to combat it. However, we see problems with gendering in the support as well. We have national organizations such as Women Helping Women and Male Survivor that cater exclusively to one gender. And we have national programs such as Rape Aggression Defense that we offer here at MTSU exclusively to women. Additionally, many of the resources that are gender inclusive and gender neutral are named and advertised to suggest otherwise, such as the National Organization for Violence Against Women, the White House Council for Women and Girls, and the June Anderson Center for Women here on campus. All focus on sexual assault prevention and domestic violence prevention for all genders, but there is power in their name. This history of gendering through sexual assault, through support and prevention, has created a series of problems. The first being the lack of proper education, with the biggest hurdle being the false belief that having an erection means you're giving consent. In 2014, MTSU hosted a program titled A Call to Men. This program focused on the male population and talked and relayed messages about how to prevent them from being perpetrators. However, we see few programs in place to educate men about giving consent. Thus, we see undereducated victims who do not realize that being under the influence of alcohol or simply sustaining an erection throughout the attack does not mean that they were consenting to sex. This problem with education creates a domino effect, leading us into what is probably the largest issue created by gender essentialist rhetoric: denial. Our culture creates a system where men cannot be viewed as victims. Until a change in 2012, the FBI's definition of rape only included female victims. This set a precedent and caused gross underreporting of male victims. And thus we see problems like this, where male victims are ridiculed and delegitimized for claiming to be a victim. Another example, in the 2012 documentary The Invisible War, explores sexual assault in the military, but only features a single male victim, despite high reports and even higher predictions of male victims in the military. Finally, With the the erection equals consent fallacy, we see men are often written off as having wanted it. In his September 2014 article, The Flesh is Weak, Ali Fogg cites 6 specific court cases that were thrown out simply because the male sustained an erection throughout the attack. Because of these problems created, males become reluctant to report their assault. The U.S. Department of Justice 2014 report predicts that 80% of colleges and 80% of sexual assaults on college-aged adults will go unreported, with males far less likely to report than females. Furthermore, a 2014 study conducted by the RAND Corporation reports that this problem is especially prevalent in the military, reporting that over 50% of sexual assault victims in the military are male, but only a maximum of 13% of those will create an official report. In addition, 2015 report from the Department of Defense tells us that 62% of these personnel that did file a report were met with retaliation, being told that they must have been asking for it. Males are also denied certain preventative measures. In my personal interview with a rape aggression defense instructor on campus, I asked why males were not allowed to take the course, or why there is not an equivalent. The disappointing response that I received is that there is not an equivalent because rape is not a problem for men. So we've explored the problems created by gender essentialist rhetoric. Let's examine some solutions. The first solution would be to move from gendered rhetoric to gender-neutral rhetoric, such as this. Changing the way we look at an issue will change the way we approach the issue. So by avoiding rhetoric that perpetuates this gendered victim-perpetrator dichotomy, we open up the door to more inclusive support and education groups, like It's On Us, a national organization dedicated to sexual assault and prevention for every gender. Second, we should move towards more gender-inclusive education. Expanding our understanding of consent will allow us to target potential victims and perpetrators of every gender. And finally, we should provide more gender-inclusive support. With more inclusive support, males would be more likely to report their sexual assault. Additionally, we would be able to move our culture towards one of acceptance rather than denial. Today, I have informed you of the history of victim rhetoric, talked about the problems created by it, and presented some solutions. Sexual assault is a problem that affects people of every gender, so why shouldn't our rhetoric reflect that? Perhaps if it did, Trey Malone would have published his novel rather than his suicide note.